President Trump wrapped up the Japan leg of his Asian tour today, where he announced a trade deal after meeting with the country's new prime minister. Under the new agreement, the U.S. will impose a 15% tariff on nearly all Japanese imports.
President Trump wrapped up his stop in Japan, announcing a new trade deal, new investments in the U.S. economy.
President Trump's been meeting Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi for talks on trade and security. The pair have already signed a framework deal on the supply of critical minerals and rare earth minerals.
President Sanae Takaichi assumed Japan's highest office, it marked far more than a routine political transition. The world watched closely as, for the first time in history, a woman took the helm of Japanese leadership, an event that signaled not only a cultural milestone but potential redefinition of Japan's global posture. From the outset, Takaichi's tone and policies hinted at transformation. In her first call with U.S. President Donald Trump, she underscored that Japan's alliance with Washington would remain the foundation of her government's foreign policy. But beneath that assurance was a distinct edge, a determination to recalibrate the balance of power between Tokyo and its most important ally. Within weeks of taking office, Takaichi's administration announced that Japan's defense spending would reach 2% of its GDP a full year ahead of schedule. To outside observers, the move seemed like a direct signal. Japan was stepping up militarily, aligning more closely with America's strategic priorities in the Pacific. Yet the deeper message was one of assertion rather than obedience. The new prime minister was strengthening ties, but on Japan's own terms. Behind the headlines about defense budgets and alliance commitments, Takaichi was quietly redrawing the lines of Japan's identity on the global stage, asserting that the nation could be loyal to its allies without being bound by them. At first, few expected major departures from established policy. Japan's path had long been defined by stability, anchored in its partnership with the United States, cautious in diplomacy and pragmatic in trade. Yet Takaichi's leadership soon revealed a subtle but powerful shift. She began blending traditional loyalty with an unmistakable push for self-reliance. Her rise represented more than a change in leadership. It embodied a new vision of Japan as an active, independent power in its own right. That vision came into focus during her early interactions with the Trump administration. According to insiders familiar with their communications, Tokyo surprised Washington by rejecting several proposed trade arrangements. For decades, Japan had been seen as one of America's most dependable allies, a country that purchased U.S. weapons, joined joint exercises, and hosted thousands of American troops. But Takaichi drew a clear line between defense cooperation and economic sovereignty. Japan, she signaled, would no longer be a passive participant in U.S.-driven trade negotiations. The alliance would endure, but Tokyo's economic decisions would reflect Japanese, not American, priorities. This dual approach, deepening military alignment while asserting economic independence, introduced a new dynamic into the U.S.-Japan relationship. It was both stabilizing and unsettling. Washington welcomed Japan's willingness to shoulder a greater defense burden, especially as tensions with China and North Korea escalated. But it bristled at Tokyo's resistance on trade, where Japan refused to concede ground. For a negotiator like Trump, used to commanding leverage, Takaichi's firmness represented an unfamiliar challenge. American diplomats began to describe Japan's posture not as defiance, but as evolution, an ally seeking parity rather than patronage. Inside Japan, this stance was widely viewed as a test of leadership. Takaichi's government needed to preserve the strategic shield provided by U.S. defense commitments while answering domestic calls for greater economic autonomy. Japan's security architecture, rooted in decades of post-war cooperation, relied heavily on American forces, intelligence networks, and defense technology. Yet economically, dependence came with costs. Years of sluggish growth, an aging population, and rising nationalist sentiment had fueled demands for more self-determination in trade and industrial policy. Takaichi's challenge was to walk the narrow line between reassurance and independence. Her strategy reflected this balance. Accelerating defense spending demonstrated solidarity with Washington, satisfying U.S. expectations for burden sharing. Simultaneously, her resistance in trade talks asserted Japan's right to set its own economic course. The message was nuanced but firm. Japan would stand with the United States, but not beneath it. This redefinition of the alliance is one of equals unsettled traditional assumptions about the post-war order in Asia. For analysts on both sides of the Pacific, Takaichi's actions raise important questions about the future of the U.S.-Japan partnership. Could Washington adjust to an ally that sought not merely to follow but to influence policy direction? Could Japan maintain its defense commitments while carving out an independent economic identity? In think tanks and ministries, speculation mounted that Japan might revisit key trade frameworks, pushing for revisions that would better serve domestic industries. Some U.S. officials interpreted this as a challenge to American primacy. Others saw it as a natural evolution toward a more balanced partnership. The shift also reverberated through Asia's strategic landscape. Japan's assertiveness introduced new uncertainty at a time when regional power dynamics were already in flux. As the U.S. confronted China's growing influence and North Korea's nuclear provocations, Tokyo's new independence complicated Washington's calculations. A more autonomous Japan could either strengthen the alliance by sharing burdens and leadership, or strain it if diverging interests emerged. For China, Takai's posture presented both a risk and an opportunity. Japan's closer defense coordination with the U.S. reinforced containment, but Tokyo's insistence on economic independence left room for selective engagement domestically. Takai's policies stirred both admiration and anxiety. Her assertive diplomacy appealed to national pride, presenting Japan as a confident, equal partner on the world stage. But increased defense spending, coupled with firm trade policies, risked economic strain and political pushback. Critics warned that a heavier military burden might divert resources from social programs, while businesses expressed concern about possible frictions with the U.S. market. Supporters countered that Takai was finally freeing Japan from decades of strategic dependency, restoring dignity without dismantling security. Behind the scenes, intelligence analysts suggested that Takai's timing was deliberate. With Washington's attention divided among multiple global fronts, China, the Indo-Pacific, Ukraine, she saw an opening to reposition Japan. The goal was to move from being America's junior ally to a true strategic partner. One Japanese commentator summarized her intent bluntly: Japan would act as America's ally, not its pawn. This distinction, subtle yet profound, reshaped the logic of the alliance. Still, the approach carried inherent tension. Japan's defense ambitions and its pursuit of economic independence were advancing at different speeds. Defense cooperation deepened quickly, while trade autonomy evolved more cautiously. This imbalance risked generating friction if expectations on either side grew misaligned. For Washington, the question became whether it could accept a Japan that demanded equal influence in setting regional priorities. For Tokyo, the challenge was whether it could assert sovereignty without jeopardizing the alliance that guaranteed its security. In an effort to preserve equilibrium, both governments explored symbolic gestures to reaffirm goodwill. Reports surfaced that Japan might increase purchases of American defense systems or consider importing U.S.-made vehicles like the Ford F-150, moves designed more to smooth political relations than to meet practical needs. Such gestures highlighted the delicate diplomacy at play. Every act of cooperation was scrutinized for sincerity, every act of defiance interpreted as provocation. The evolving partnership between Washington and Tokyo thus entered a new, more complex phase. Japan's growing confidence was reshaping one of the world's most important alliances. Where once the U.S. dictated and Japan followed, now the two powers were negotiating as near equals, each weighing loyalty against leverage, strategy against sovereignty. For the first time in decades, Japan's foreign policy seemed driven less by accommodation and more by ambition. As global attention turns to the next round of high-level meetings between Takai and the U.S. president, the stakes could not be higher. For Washington, the task is to adapt to a Japan that seeks genuine partnership rather than compliance. For Tokyo, the test is to maintain trust while asserting independence. Between them lies the fragile balance that will define not only the future of their alliance but the wider architecture of power in Asia. The outcome of that balance, between cooperation and control, pride and pragmatism, will determine whether Japan's new era becomes a story of shared strength or emerging rivalry. The next phase of U.S.-Japan relations is unfolding through a series of encounters that could define their partnership for years to come. The discussions now underway encompass defense cooperation, trade negotiations, and new avenues for investment and technology. The results may determine whether this evolving alliance stabilizes into a stronger partnership or fractures under pressure. If Japan declines a major procurement deal or limits U.S. access to its markets, Washington could react sharply. Yet if both nations manage to build consensus and replace unilateral expectations with mutual respect, the relationship may emerge more resilient than ever. At its core, This moment is one of transformation rather than turmoil. The foundation of the U.S.Japan alliance remains intact, but its structure is being redefined. Japan is stepping out of the post-war framework that long shaped its identity, seeking to become both a dependable ally and an autonomous power. For Prime Minister Sanai Takai's government, that ambition brings both promise and peril. Success would elevate Japan's standing across the Indo-Pacific, enhancing its credibility and influence. Failure, however, could invite mistrust, economic strain, and domestic instability. Observers around the world are closely watching the indicators that will reveal which direction this partnership will take. Will Tokyo continue resisting American trade proposals, or will it compromise for the sake of stability? Will Washington meet Japan's assertiveness with flexibility or with frustration? And perhaps most crucially, will Japan's public continue to support Takai's bold course if economic pressure begins to build? Each of these questions will shape the strength and trajectory of one of the world's most critical alliances in the coming years. What makes this juncture historic is not confrontation but recalibration. Japan's global identity is being rewritten. The era of automatic alignment with Washington is giving way to one that requires negotiation, dialogue, and strategic balance. Every policy choice, every diplomatic exchange now carries implications that ripple across the Pacific. The alliance endures, but it is evolving into something more intricate, an arrangement defined by both cooperation and contention. Japan's resolve to strengthen its defense posture while safeguarding economic independence marks the beginning of a new chapter in regional geopolitics that Takai's leadership has turned what was once a predictable partnership into a delicate test of diplomacy and willpower. Her ability to navigate competing interests will determine whether Japan emerges as a stronger, more self-assured nation capable of shaping its own destiny, or whether the strain of balancing autonomy and alliance leads to friction. If she succeeds, Japan could redefine its role as a central force in the Indo-Pacific. But if that balance falters, tensions could rise, cooling what has long been a cornerstone of regional stability. Every move from this point forward carries weight. Each announcement on trade, every gesture of military cooperation, and the public's reaction to economic shifts will signal where the relationship is headed. Domestic politics could prove decisive. Public confidence in Takai's leadership is far from guaranteed.